They say love changes everything. But what if that love forces you to choose between the heart and the family who raised you? Daniel faced that choice, and the consequences were beyond anything he imagined. Daniel had always lived a life of expectation. Born into a family whose name carried weight, respect, and tradition, he was groomed to follow a path already mapped out before him. University degrees, a prestigious job, social appearances, family alliances, all of it carefully orchestrated. And for years, he had walked that path dutifully, quietly, almost like a shadow moving within someone else's plan. Then came Amara. It wasn't in a grand cinematic moment. She wasn't the kind of person who demanded attention. She just entered a room and suddenly, somehow, everything else faded. The cafe was noisy that afternoon, the chatter of conversations mixing with the hiss of the espresso machine. Daniel had been reviewing notes on his laptop, mentally preparing for a family meeting he dreaded, when she tripped on the edge of a rug and nearly spilled her coffee. He caught the cup instinctively, their hands brushing. A spark, inexplicable, like static electricity running through the air. "I'm so sorry," she laughed, a sound that was bright, unrestrained, almost reckless. "I should have watched where I was going." "It's fine," Daniel said, but he felt an unusual pull in his chest. Something about her honesty, her presence, the way she seemed unafraid of chaos was intoxicating. They started talking. At first, it was casual. Coffee orders, the weather, fleeting comments about the city. But then conversations deepened. Hopes, fears, dreams. Daniel realized that for the first time in years, he wasn't performing, wasn't following a script. He was simply himself, and she accepted him without hesitation. Days turned into weeks. Every encounter felt inevitable, as if life itself was conspiring to bring them together. They laughed, argued playfully, shared secrets no one else would understand. With Amara, Daniel felt alive in a way that terrified him, alive and free. But the shadow of his family loomed. Daniel's parents were traditional, insistent on loyalty to the family name. They had visions of the perfect partner for him, someone from the right circles, with the right manners, the right pedigree. Amara was none of those things. She was independent, ambitious in her own way, vibrant and untamed. In their eyes, she was a mistake waiting to happen. He tried to ignore it. He told himself that love was strong enough to withstand disapproval. But the weight of expectations pressed on him like a storm cloud he couldn't shake. Then came the day that forced a choice. It was a Sunday brunch at his parents' estate, a gathering of relatives and family friends. Daniel had invited Amara, hoping to introduce her gently. The moment she stepped into the grand dining room, he could feel the tension snap into the air. His mother's eyes narrowed, his father's jaw clenched, and whispers spread like wildfire. "Who is this?" his mother asked, her tone sharp. "This is Amara," Daniel said, his voice steadier than he felt. "My partner." The words hung in the air, heavier than lead. Conversation stilled. Eyes watched them, judging, assessing, ready to pounce. His father's voice finally broke the silence. "Daniel, you know what we expect from you. This is not acceptable." Daniel's heart pounded. He could feel Amara's hand brushing against his under the table, a quiet anchor, and he knew then that the choice was his alone. He could retreat into the life his family had planned, or he could step forward into a love that was real, that was messy, and that might cost him everything. He chose Amara. It was not a grand declaration or dramatic scene. He simply looked at his father and said, "I love her and I'm staying with her." The room went silent. Then slowly murmurs rise. His uncle's face hardened. His mother's eyes filled with tears. Not the kind of joy tears, but a mix of anger, disappointment, and disbelief. Daniel didn't flinch. He had made his choice. But even in that moment of clarity, a tiny gnawing fear lingered in the back of his mind. What have I just done? Days after that brunch felt so real. Daniel and Amara walked hand in hand through the city streets, but the joy he had felt with her now mingled with a sharp undercurrent of fear. Messages went unanswered. Invitations were withdrawn. Friends who had once been like family now avoided him. Every interaction seemed charged with judgment, as if the air itself whispered, "You've made a mistake." At home, the silence from his parents was deafening. Calls went unanswered, emails ignored, letters arrived, each one polite in tone but laced with disappointment. Words like disrespect, betrayal, irresponsible were repeated over and over in carefully crafted sentences. Daniel felt torn. Part of him wanted to retreat, to apologize, to reclaim the security he had abandoned. But every time he looked at Amara, he remembered the laughter, the spark in her eyes, the sense of freedom he had never known. He could not turn back, not without sacrificing himself. Amara, meanwhile, became his anchor. She never blamed him for the storm. If anything, she encouraged him to stand firm, to trust that love, even when tested, was worth fighting for. "You can't let them control you," she said one evening as they sat on the balcony overlooking the city lights. "You can be angry, they can be disappointed, but you have to choose yourself sometimes." Daniel nodded. Yet inside, a quiet fear lingered. It wasn't just anger or disappointment. There were whispers of sabotage, subtle warnings from relatives who wanted to remind him that no choice was without consequence. Then the first blow landed. A close friend from his childhood, someone he had confided in for years, called one evening. His tone was careful, almost rehearsed. "You need to rethink this, Daniel. Amara, she's not part of our world. You are throwing away everything you've built." Daniel's chest tightened. He tried to reason, to explain, but his friend had already made a judgment. The call ended, leaving Daniel staring at the phone in disbelief. Even those he thought he could trust were slipping away. The financial strain followed quickly. The family business, which had always been a safety net, was no longer accessible. Investments that had been promised were withheld. The reality of independent life hit like a wave, unexpected, overwhelming, relentless. And still, Daniel refused to back down. But the weight of disapproval began to press harder, turning into tension at every corner. Invitations to social events disappeared, colleagues whispered in hallways, and even casual acquaintances seemed to measure him differently. Every smile felt forced. Every glance seemed a question. Why would you choose her over them? Yet, through it all, Amara remained by his side. She did not shy away from the challenges. She embraced them, facing the world with courage and grace. Slowly, Daniel realized that the love he had thought would protect him from all harm was not a shield. It was a compass, guiding him through the storm. Still, the storm was not done. One evening, a family intervention came to his apartment unannounced. His father, flanked by relatives, demanded a private conversation. The tension was unbearable. Every word felt like a test, every glance a reminder of what was at stake. "Daniel," his father began, voice calm but cold, "we've been patient. We've tolerated this relationship, but it cannot continue. You are endangering everything we've built. For what? A fleeting romance?" Daniel's hands clenched. Amara squeezed his hand under the table, a quiet reassurance. "It's not fleeting," he said, his voice steady. "It's real, and I will not abandon it or her for anyone, even you." The room fell silent. His father's face darkened, and his mother's eyes filled with tears, not of joy, but of frustration and disbelief. Daniel realized then that there would be no easy reconciliation. Choosing Amara had severed ties he had once thought unbreakable. That night, as they lay awake in their modest apartment, he thought about the future. The comfort of his old life, the approval of family, the security he had always known, they were gone. What remained was love, raw and unpolished, and the uncertainty of a life built from scratch. "I don't know if I made the right choice," he admitted quietly. "You did," she whispered. "The right choice isn't always the easy one, and sometimes the hardest choices are the ones that define us." But even as he nodded, Daniel knew that love, though powerful, would not spare him from the consequences. Life outside the shadow of Daniel's family was not what he had imagined. The freedom to live for love came with an unexpected burden. Every small decision carried weight, and every misstep was magnified. The apartment, modest and far smaller than the family estates Daniel had known, felt both like a haven and a cage. Each morning, Daniel faced bills, deadlines, and the uncomfortable reality that the family safety net he had relied on was gone. Every investment, every financial connection cut off. Amara worked tirelessly as well, juggling her own career while supporting Daniel emotionally through the chaos. She never complained, but Daniel could see the toll it took on her. Late nights, missed meals, stress etched into her face. And yet, every time he looked at her, he knew that standing by her was worth it, if only love could solve the rest. But love doesn't solve everything. Rumors began to spread. Whispers from colleagues, distant relatives, even strangers who thought they had the right to judge. People questioned their relationship, mocked Daniel for throwing away his life, and whispered that Amara was a gold digger or only here for his money. Every word stung. Every accusation cut deeper than any financial loss. Then came the sabotage. A family friend, one who had once been close to Daniel, began interfering with his work, sending letters to clients, questioning his competence, and subtly undermining him at every turn. Daniel had to fight to maintain his reputation, to prove that he was more than just the son of a wealthy family, and that his love for Amara did not make him weak. Even within their relationship, tension began to creep in. Late nights, endless responsibilities, and constant scrutiny created arguments over money, priorities, and choices. Daniel would sometimes snap, frustrated at the world's cruelty. Amara, steadfast but human, would fight back, reminding him that love was about partnership, not perfection. "You can't carry everyone else's judgment on your shoulders," she said one night, sitting beside him on the small sofa. "We chose this life. We chose each other. That's enough." But was it enough? One evening, Daniel received news that threatened to break him. A major opportunity at work, a position that could stabilize their finances, was suddenly in jeopardy. Someone from the family circle had interfered directly, spreading false rumors that questioned his integrity. He sat in the apartment, head in his hands, wondering if all his sacrifices were worth it. And yet, Amara remained unwavering, placing her hand on his shoulder. "You can do this," she whispered. "I believe in you. We will survive this together." Daniel realized then that love, while powerful, demanded more than passion. It demanded resilience, patience, and the courage to face a world determined to see them fail. Every struggle, every obstacle was a test of their commitment. And the tests were only growing more intense. The family's interventions became more aggressive. Friends he thought were loyal began to take sides. Daniel and Amara realized that they were not just fighting for love, they were fighting for their life together against forces that would see them broken. Through it all, one truth became clear. The path they had chosen was not easy, and it never would be. Love was not a shield from hardship. It was a reason to endure it. And as Daniel looked at Amara, exhausted but determined, he knew that together they could face whatever came next, even if the price kept climbing. The months of struggle had hardened Daniel in ways he never imagined. Every challenge, every setback, every judgment from friends and family had carved lines into his face, but it had also strengthened something deeper within him, a resolve to stand by the woman he loved. Amara had been his rock, steadfast and unyielding, but even she could not shield him from the next wave of consequences. One evening, an unexpected letter arrived, legal papers from his family. They were demanding repayment of money Daniel had been lent as a trust, claiming he had violated agreements and threatening litigation. Daniel stared at the documents, heart pounding. The life he had built with Amara was now under threat, not from the world outside, but from the people he had once loved most. Amara placed a hand on his shoulder. "We'll fight this," she said quietly. "We've survived everything else. We can survive this too." But survival came at a cost. They were forced to sell possessions, cut back on living expenses, and make decisions that would have been unthinkable months ago. Friends who had stayed began to drift away under pressure from Daniel's family. Every small victory was tempered by another loss. And then came the betrayal Daniel never saw coming. A close family member, someone he had trusted implicitly, approached him, offering help but secretly plotting to take advantage of the tension. They leaked false information to his workplace, spreading rumors that questioned his loyalty and competence. Daniel found himself fighting not just for love, but for his reputation, sanity, and future. One night, as he and Amara sat in their small apartment, Daniel broke down. "I thought love would be enough," he whispered, voice shaking. "I didn't know it could cost so much, that I could lose everything I ever had." Amara took his hands in hers, her eyes unwavering. "Love is never cheap," she said. "It's not about avoiding the cost. It's about paying it together, no matter how high it is." The true climax came when Daniel was summoned by his family for one final confrontation. It was not an invitation, it was an ultimatum. Renounce Amara, apologize publicly, and submit to their control, or be cut off entirely, erased from the family legacy he had once relied on. He stood in front of them, heart pounding, every memory of his childhood, every expectation weighing on him. And yet, he looked at Amara, standing firm by his side, and he knew what he had to do. "I will not renounce the person I love," Daniel said, his voice strong, even as tears formed. "I cannot betray my heart to satisfy fear or tradition. I choose her. I always have." Silence fell. The room crackled with tension, disbelief, and anger. Some family members turned away, unable to face his defiance. Others watched silently, perhaps reconsidering their own judgments. But one truth remained undeniable. The decision was made, and the cost was now real. Daniel lost more than he expected. Family ties that had seemed unbreakable were severed. Inheritance, wealth, and social standing were gone. Yet, in the emptiness left behind, he found something far more profound: freedom, integrity, and a love that had been tested and proven unshakable. He and Amara rebuilt their life slowly. Every challenge, every obstacle, every hardship became a testament to their resilience. The love that had once seemed too costly now proved its worth, not in material wealth or family approval, but in the courage to stand together against the storm. And as they sat one evening, looking out over a city that no longer judged them, Daniel realized the final truth. Sometimes, love asks for everything, and sometimes it gives you more than you ever imagined in return. Daniel had chosen love over family. He had paid a price so high it broke him and reshaped him in ways he never thought possible. But in the end, he discovered that true love, the kind worth fighting for, is priceless. And sometimes, losing everything else is the only way to truly gain everything that matters.